Did you have glasses?
Kenmore City Council is now in session. Would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Baker,
Here.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Kugler,
Here.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Here.
Mayor Herbig,
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Here.
Councilmember File,
Here.
all present.
Would you all please stand and join me in the flag salute?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Unless there's any objections, the agenda will stand approved. Seeing no objections, the agenda is approved as published. Next, we have two proclamations, and I would like to welcome Councilmember File to read the Pride Month proclamation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to present the City of Kenmore, Washington's proclamation on Pride Month. Whereas the City of and Council Kenmore acknowledge and celebrate the diverse population, understanding the unique tapestry woven by our varied cultures, traditions, beliefs, and experiences is one of our most significant strengths. This diversity and intersectionality of our people enrich our community, fostering an environment of understanding, growth, and unity. And whereas we assert and uphold the principle that every individual, regardless of their identity or background, deserves to live in an atmosphere of dignity, respect, and justice, we categorically condemn and will not tolerate any form of discrimination, violence, or hate, holding these acts as affronts to the values we cherish as a community. And whereas the City of Kenmore honors the invaluable contributions made by the LGBTQ plus community across various fields, such as the arts, literature, business, labor, and public service, their creativity and innovation and dedication to enhance the vibrancy and dynamism of our city. And whereas we acknowledge and appreciate the significant strides made by the LGBTQ plus community and advocating for the rights and freedoms, the legislation of marriage equality, the affirmation of identity, and the freedom to love without restriction represents a landmark victories, not just for the LGBTQ plus community, but for the broader cause of human rights. And whereas we recognize with deep concern that the LGBTQ plus community continues to face challenges such as harassment, intimidation, discrimination, and violence, we stand in solidarity with them and vow to fight these injustices. And whereas the City of Kenmore reaffirms its commitment to creating and maintaining an environment that is safe, inclusive, welcoming for all individuals, regardless of their sexual orientation, gender identity, or any other characteristic. We pledge to continuously strive towards enhancing the inclusivity and acceptance within our city. And whereas Pride Month is a celebration of the progress, achievements, and resilience of the LGBTQ plus community, this is a time to highlight and appreciate the numerous contributions made by this community and to unequivocally assert that the LGBTQ plus rights are human rights.
Now, therefore, I, Nigel Herbig, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, acting on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim June 2023 as Pride Month throughout the City of Kenmore. We invite all members of our community to participate in this celebration, fostering culture of acceptance, love, and pride across the City of Kenmore. And accepting this proclamation will be Jeannie Galloway. Would you like to come up and say a few words? Sure. Perfect.
So thank you so much, Mayor Herbig, and also members of the City Council and community members and staff. Really coming together in times when I think the world is very fraught. There's a lot of bad things that happen in our communities and in the world. And I think when you come together and come together in person and make a proclamation that we are noticing each other and that we are caring about each other and that we're embracing not only our differences, but the very many commonalities we all share. We have so much more in common than we have different as humans. And I think that that is a way forward for us in hard times. I think it's a way for us to combat the uninformed minds that I think would like to divide and to split us up. So thank you so much on behalf of the gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, other kinds of allies, all of the pluses that are out there. Thank you so much for noticing and caring and promoting the fact that we live here and we work here and we are adding value to all of the lives in the city of Kenmore. So thanks so much. This is a very meaningful act by the city, and thank you so much.
Thank you. And would you like to join us over by the flags for a quick photo? And next, I would like to invite Deputy Mayor O'Kane to read our proclamation for National Gun Violence Awareness Day.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do want to thank you for the opportunity for us, for Karina to be able to read the Pride Proclamation and for me to read the gun violence proclamation. It's very meaningful, I know, for both of us. So thank you. Whereas every day, more than 300 people are directly impacted by gun violence in the United States, and whereas no one is immune from the tragedies of gun violence in America, and whereas protecting public safety in the community is one of the City of Kenmore's highest responsibilities, and whereas support for Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens goes hand in hand with keeping guns away from people with dangerous histories, and whereas National Gun Violence Awareness Day is a day to raise awareness about gun violence and honor lives of gun violence and victims, and whereas gun violence prevention advocates and organizations nationwide have taken up the color orange as the color of gun awareness, and whereas we renew our commitment to reduce gun violence, pledge to do all we can to keep firearms out of the wrong hands, and encourage responsible gun ownership to keep our children safe.
Now therefore, I, Nigel Herbig, Mayor of the City of Kenmore, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim June 2nd, 2023 to be National Gun Violence Awareness Day throughout the City of Kenmore. We encourage our community to wear orange on that day. Next on the agenda, we have a presentation, introduction of new staff. So we have GIS analyst Amanda Larson, introduced by Environmental Services Director Richard Sawyer.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, City Council. So I am excited to introduce two new staff to you this evening. And first, I'd like to start with the city's new GIS analyst, Amanda Larson. She comes to us from the private sector with over 12 years of experience working in GIS services. So she is, we're very excited to have her, and we have a lot of work lined up in GIS. As you all know, we've been asking for some time to get this position on board. So we're super excited. And she's been here for about 2 weeks now. And I'll turn it over to her. Let her say any Couple words.
Amanda, will you turn your microphone on? Green light.
Well, you said everything I was going to say, so thanks. Yeah, like you said, I've been in GIS a long time, but primarily in the private sector, and I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited that everyone is excited for me to be here.
I think I'll also add, she is a local Kenmore resident as well, so.
Oh,
That's
welcome.
true. I live by the high school, and I enjoy the short commute, so.
All right. Well, I will take a note on that and maybe leave more for Nina to say, but we're also very excited to introduce you to our new Climate Action Program Manager, Nina Rasmussen. And I'll just leave it at there so you can say a few words.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, I'm Nina. I came from the city of Wichita in Kansas. So doing very similar work, trying to get climate action off the ground and really bolster some of those efforts. So I'm really excited to be here, and especially to have a very supportive council to be able to really push the envelope for some of these actions. And this is my third week here.
Thanks, Nina. And so those are my two staff. I don't know if there are any questions.
No, but I think on behalf of the council, welcome. We're happy you're here, and yeah, we're happy you're part of the team. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And next up, we have our Housing and Human Services Manager, Tamby Cork, introduced by Deputy City Manager Stephanie Lukash.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of the council. I am so thrilled to be here tonight introducing you to Tamby Cork. She comes to us after 13 years with the City of Mercer Island in human services and progressively responsible positions there, and she's just incredible. Today's her first day on the job. So it was a little bit of a whirlwind. It's been a long day. She was here early, but I'm so pleased. She said, I don't mind long days. And I said, well, that bodes well for the work ahead. So we're just so excited to have her, and I'll let her introduce herself. We're here. I just remind the council and the community, we're here because this is the council's #2 priority is affordable housing, and appreciate very much the opportunity to staff that resources appropriately and move forward with some really important work for our community.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good evening, council. As Stephanie said, I'm Tamby Cork. I'm coming to you from the city of Mercer Island, where I spent 13 years supporting human services in that community, most recently as their administrator. So I have a great deal of respect and value the opportunities that human services can bring to a community. I've seen some really great successes over my career so far, and I'm really excited to see what we can build here in Kenmore to support all the members of the community. And thank you for your support for this important work. We wouldn't be doing this without you. And so the values of the council came through loud and clear in the creation of this position. So thank you.
Thank you. And I hope that your first day has been good.
Been great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. Next up, where's the fun?
Yeah, so it was a busy weekend, eventful weekend for the Kenmore Waterfront Activities Center. They run the hand-powered watercraft programs at our newly improved Tlahwadis Park. And they had two competitive events this last weekend where Kenmore was represented. Michelle, could you put up a couple of slides? Yeah, so one of the things we say in the contract is whenever you go to competitions, you gotta show the Kenmore brand. So they're making good on that promise. And this was in Tacoma, and it was at the Rainier Dragon Boat Festival this past Saturday. And what they call the mixed team did extremely well by taking first place in their division. So they brought home gold. And so that's what happened over in Tacoma. And then over also in Pierce County, the Outrigger Canoe Club also made a splash, no pun intended. And they won first place in several categories. including some little kids who also won. So, all right, and we have a little video of the champions, the Kenmore champions, coming out of their boat after they had just won first place. So pretty cool, huh? So Kenmore's getting known and recognized out there. And then also we had I wanted to share two because it was just too hard to resist, but this is a picture of Mount Baker. And one of my coworkers, Jarrett Smith, he's our right-of-way inspector, he summited Mount Baker this weekend. So why am I sharing this with you? What does this have to do with Kenmore? Well, you'll find out at the end. So they started out this weekend with pretty good weather. And then this is where they set up their base camp. And when you summit a mountain like this, you often have to start really late at night, like 1 in the morning or something like that. But they were having pretty decent weather, and there was even a nice sunset. And then they started hiking in the dark, but they soon started getting surrounded by clouds. And this was the visibility they had on the way up, but they kept going. And here's what Jarrett had to say. He said, "When we arrived at the summit, I took out the Kenmore flag and held it up high on the summit of Mount Baker at 10,786 feet. Others who were at the summit with us were from all over the place and asked about Kenmore. It was such a fun trip where I was able to share our story with others." So again, representing Kenmore, even on the summit of Mount Baker.
That's some great guerrilla marketing there. Love it. Thank you. Next up is public comments. We welcome the community members to the council's meeting. In this forum, the council does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary role of the council is to listen. We'll hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you're online, please use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. All guests must address comments to the mayor and city council. The clerk will acknowledge your receipt, your request, and call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when we can confirm that we can hear you. Please state your name and city of residence for the record and keep your comments to the allotted time. We will not split your time with others or reset your time except by express approval of the presiding officer. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the council or clerk in advance. Please not comment about pending development projects in which the council will make future decisions, as those are quasi judicial matters and council members must limit their communications about such matters. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for taking the time to express your comments. Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We have one individual signed up for on-site public comment, Dakota Rash.
Can you hear me? Yes, you can. All right. Good afternoon, all. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dakota Rash. I'm a resident of Lake Forest Park. I want to first express my sincere excitement that there is new staff specifically engaged towards the environment. I think that the city level is going to be really instrumental in fighting climate change because we are seeing a massive shortfalling at higher levels to adequately address climate change. The smoke in the sky, that was smoke during the heat wave the last couple of weeks. That's because Alberta is literally on fire. And oddly enough, you're not seeing climate change discussed in the neck-to-neck presidential race there. That's maybe having to do with the fact that that's oil country. We are also seeing that the Biden administration is approving more oil and gas extraction than the Trump administration. But the state of New York recently passed a law that allows its local administration, the name is out of my head right now, to manage its own public power. So it's going to be able to completely control its renewables. And so when you see successes right now in the climate crisis, you're seeing them at the local level, you're seeing them at the state level. And so we need to lead that charge. And I hope that new staff's going to be able to do that. A couple of very specific comments tonight. I understand there's a bit of a ruckus having to do with the cement facility, the asphalt facility. I think there's going to be some comments on that tonight, and not to cut them off, well, obviously not cutting them off, but adding to them, I want to re-highlight something that I've brought up with regards to that facility, and that is that there are water limitation exceedances as well as air. So that facility, since it started operating in 1994, has had 67 violations of its Clean Water Act permit as well. That's publicly accessible information on the Paris system, really fun little database search if you ever have extra time. And in the past, I've said that those are non-numerical violations, which means they don't go above the numerical limit that they're set. I actually learned that that's not true. Those have been actual effluent limitation exceedances. So they are putting out more stuff than they are supposed to be putting out. And then there's a couple reporting violations as well. They're not reporting on time. So just want that to kind of flesh out the picture. It's not just air, it's also water. And I know Kenmore really cares about that specific access to water, and there's not a lot of turnover in that spot. So it sits and then it festers and then it creates more toxins. So I just wanted to have that help create the more complete picture. Had another nuanced comment, but I think my time's up for tonight, so I'll bring it up later. Thank you.
Mayor, I have no more individuals signed up for on-site public comment. Can we move on to virtual?
Yes.
Great. If you are virtual and like to give public comment at this time, please use the raise hand function. We currently have 4 individuals with their hands raised for virtual public comment, and we will take them in this order. Stacy Valenzuela, followed by David Morton, Chris Olson, and James Myers. Stacy, go ahead.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I am a whistleblower, speaker of truth. The neighborly thing to do is to step forward and do the right thing to protect others from harm. We, the residents, continually bring concerns forward. We continually give you a chance to do the right thing, continually ask you for full transparency and resident inclusion. We get little bits. Integrity is more than a word. It is a way of life. Let me remind you, the neighbors on the slough here brought forward their disappointment in the city after 8 surveys requesting that in gratitude a native people's name for our neighborhood park in 2012 and 13, the city named the park after a settler, Squire. I shared that concern with Susan Greathouse when she was campaigning for 2019. So in fact, the residents brought forward renaming the park. Numerous environmentalists, residents, and tribes requested to protect and preserve our neighborhood park's natural habitat. We did not ask for it to be taken over by privileged clubs. Also, where is the memorial for David Wheeler that has a legal agreement with the city required to stay on this property? Since 2017, residents have brought forward the need for very low 50% AMI and extremely low 30% AMI affordable housing. Residents alerted the city to problems with the Murphy Auction landfill site, methane and petroleum runoff, which was confirmed and located and luckily remediated. The residents brought forward concerns of the public health and harm to neighbors from the asphalt plant emissions. For years, Kenmore was deputized. Health maps showed high lung disease, asthma, cancer, yet up until 3 weeks prior to the testing results were available, a council member continued to state it's just steam. But because of the help of David Morton, the residents were correct. Residents alerted the concerns to PSCAA, whose permit stipulated testing. We now know that it's not just steam. Thank you, Janet Hayes, for sharing the violation that has been issued. When the residents bring forward our concerns, they're shrugged off. You need to know you were voted to represent all the stakeholders, not your own agenda, developers, and not just the city staff. Staff is supposed to work for us through you. A board should be diverse and bring different groups forward, not suppressed and bullied while you claim courtesy in Kenmore. We are the people. Our rights should be respected. We have continually asked for transparency, consideration, democracy, financial budgeting for all stakeholders. We request requirements for receipts for expenses. We request lower taxes. We request more grants and more budget cuts hold back the city within budget. We request you hold those accountable for their actions, show courtesy and respect to others rather than ignore, belittling,
Stacy, your
and
time is
bullying.
up.
Thank you.
David Morton.
Good evening, council members. I'm David Morton. I live near Redmond. Cadman has owned and operated the asphalt plant in Kenmore since July 2017. In January 2023, the plant was rebranded as Heidelberg Materials. Numerous residential and commercial buildings are located near the plant, and residents have complained for years that emissions from the plant cause illnesses and have a horrible stench. As a condition of the plant's new permit issued in October 2022, the plant was required by January 2023 to demonstrate compliance with emission standards for particulate matter, VOC, carbon monoxide, and nitrogen oxides. A test report submitted to PSCAA in March 2023 shows the plant's failure to comply with those emission standards. As a result, on May 8, 2023, PSCAA issued a notice of violation to Cadman Heidelberg, citing violation of 5 conditions of the plant's permit and requiring the environmental compliance and permitting lead of Heidelberg to submit a written report describing the actions taken to correct this violation and achieve compliance with PSCAA's regulations. That report should have been submitted by now and should include what corrections have been made or a schedule for making corrections and what will be done to prevent future violations. The plant's violations may result in a monetary civil penalty, and correcting the violations does not ensure that such a penalty will not be imposed. If the violations are significant, PSCAA may commence a court action against the business. And if the violations continue, each day is considered a separate and distinct violation and may be subject to increased civil penalties. Cadman Heidelberg hired Trinity Consultants to review the compliance emission test results, specifically looking for inaccuracies that bring questions to these results. Heidelberg and their consultants may attempt to be excluded from penalties by claiming that the excess emissions were unavoidable. Trinity claimed that catastrophic failure of the plant's equipment may have impacted the results of the compliance testing. Heidelberg will need to demonstrate that the catastrophic failure was not caused by poor or inadequate design, operation, maintenance, or any other reasonably preventable condition, and that such catastrophic failure is not a recurring event. Kenmore residents and many others want to know just what will be done to bring the emissions from the Cadman Heidelberg asphalt plant into compliance. We know it's not just steam. Thank you.
Chris Olson.
Hello, evening council. I'm Chris Olson. I'm a resident of Kenmore. I have not done too much of a deep dive on the asphalt plant, so I will not be speaking to that too much this evening. But I would say that the city should do what is in its power to ensure the environmental health and safety of its for its citizens. What I came to speak about tonight was a hope that the city could incorporate complete street standards from WashDOT. Washington State Department of Transportation has provided a bulletin, Bulletin 2022-01 on complete streets, and it gives guidelines for level of traffic stress that pedestrians and bicyclists experience on different roadways and different roadway contexts. And it's pretty explicit guidance that helps ensure that new sidewalks, bike lanes, and other multimodal facilities that are developed are not only meeting a level of service, which is a capacity component, but also meeting a stress component, which makes them more desirable and usable, making them better investments for the city. I'm hoping that this could be incorporated into the municipal code, although frankly, I'm not as familiar with the standards or regulations around that, but that's something that the city engineer or other folks at the city could look into and look at incorporating that into the city roadway standards and roadway design standards. Once again, this is something that the city engineer should look at, not me. I just wanted to bring awareness to this bulletin in case the city is not already aware of it. as it provides some clear, explicit guidance from a more regional agency than the city is. So thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
James Myers.
There we go. Does that work now?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Jim Myers. I'm a resident of Kenmore. And I wanted to follow on some of the comments today, both on climate change and on work at the asphalt plant. I think what's happening now, or what's being underscored, is that business as usual, status quo, is just not enough anymore. For years and years, the Cadman plant, which was run under different names, was always there and was unregulated. The emissions were not tested, but there was always a sense, that, it's always been there. And I think I certainly commend the actions of the citizens of Kenmore and of the city of Kenmore in finally bringing this plant under regulation, so we can all see now that the emissions from the plant, are actually in exceedance of the air quality standards that have been set. That business as usual was unhealthy for the citizens of Kenmore. And in a similar way, climate change and the challenges that it's going to present us requires actions that are beyond status quo, that are beyond business as usual. We need to take a much more proactive approach to all of our environmental challenges, because if we get behind on them, there is no catching up. Certainly with climate change, once the environmental factors sort of compound themselves into this negative vortex, there is no easy way to get back. So it requires action, and it requires bold action. And it's great that the city is moving forward with its plans. And I think it behooves this city to do more to educate citizens who don't understand what the threat is, about ways that they can help alleviate what is going to be a climatic disaster. So keep up the good work, stay proactive, try and work on the problems before they become unsolvable. Thank you.
Mayor, I have no additional virtual public commenters.
Okay, I just want to actually ask the city manager really quickly. There was a question that came up earlier during public comment about the David Wheeler Memorial. Could you maybe address the status of that?
Which memorial again?
I think what Stacy said was David Wheeler, but it was Tweet's brother. The memorial at Taquadis that was supposed to, that was part of our agreement when we purchased that from the Tweets.
Yeah, so there's a metal fish sculpture, and it was temporarily removed from the site during construction. But I'm told by the project manager that it is going to be back soon.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Chair would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda stands approved. Next up, business agenda. Item A, Downtown Interactive Art Installation presented by Public Works Operations Director Jennifer Gordon and Arts of Kenmore Director Sarah Saloom Hayashi.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are here tonight to present a proposal submitted by the Kenmore Urban Pride Committee and the Arts of Kenmore to install Pride theme artwork here at City Hall. We are going to present the idea of the artwork. I'm going to have Sarah take over here in just a second, but the purpose of the presentation is to seek your approval to install it here on city property. And Sarah's going to talk a little bit about the artwork, what the plan is, and then kind of how we're going to go about implementing it.
Good evening, everyone. So yeah, just really, I'll run through as fast as I can. The heart of the project is right in line with your first proclamation this evening, raise awareness for LGBTQ+, and of course, beautify Kenmore's neighborhood in our downtown spaces with an engaging love note. Our ask is, yeah, like Jennifer said, just to approve that you let us paint the front steps of City Hall. Can read through everything. I will just note our original proposal was to paint a crosswalk. That was our first discussion. And it, both the city and Arts of Kenmore deemed it is nearly impossible to do a project at that level without involving the DOT, and that is just beyond our scope. So the city, we had met with the city and a few different ideas, different spaces in downtown were offered. One of them was the front steps of City Hall. You see two designs up there. They're not on your copies, but behind you on the screen. So the original proposal was to just paint all the pride colors along on the steps vertically, on the risers, not the top of the steps. And we would actually like to put a chevron on the far left side to be in line with the current national pride flag. We have actually received permission by Daniel Quasar, who designed the chevron, and with the only caveat that we put pictures up on his website and social media. The production will be, in there, we are asking for either June 3rd, a Saturday, either June 3rd or June 10th, to have our one community paint day. It's a pretty easy project. And then the following Sunday will be our touch-up, finishing. Asking the city, primarily Jennifer, to take care of maintenance. Pressure washing prior to the painting and then sealing it with the anti-graffiti. Much better for the city to maintain that because it's a government building. And then we'll come in and do the painting. Oh, well, this project also, I will say, is so the Kenmore Pride group is contracted with Arts of Kenmore, so we can manage the project, but also then their donors get, receive access for tax deduction. David Arthur, sitting over here, is acting liaison. They've been a terrific group to work with. You can see our budget to date. 790 has been cleared. There's actually more that has been donated. It just hasn't been cleared. And like with any responsible budget, we do not notate it until it is cleared. There's the design option. I wanted to just quickly run through appropriating excess for both if they over fundraise, and there will be extra paint. This project just doesn't require a whole lot of paint product, but the product that we have to get is both a primer and a paint specifically for concrete. We have to get gallons of it. So we'll have a lot of paint left over. We will reserve a certain amount for any touch-ups that have to happen over the next 10 years. Working with Jennifer on that and her team. However, additional funds under Arts of Kenmore, every project has to, they can either forward it to another nonprofit that is in line with their mission. They can return it back to Arts of Kenmore, and it goes strictly under one of our programs that pays it forward for public art projects like this. We could use some of it to refresh the hydrants this summer. But what we would like to do in the future years is to possibly paint the sidewalk corners. You see a cute bubble design, which is basically all of the pride colors, including BIPOC and AI. That would be one corner, but then the Pride Committee has agreed to extend the other three corners, should that be approved at another time, to BLM and our local Latinx community, and either AI or Indigenous, so that we are representing many parts of our community across that intersection, on those corners at any rate. And then city options going forward to continue LGBTQ plus support would be, street banners and utility box, but that's something else. Are there any questions?
Questions? Councilmember File and then Councilmember Kugler.
I think first I have a question for our staff or city manager. The limitation with painting a crosswalk and the impacts with WatchDOT, does that exist at 3 and 4 blocks away from 522 or?
I think what we're talking about is just standards.
Standards, okay. That is very helpful. And I love many of the different examples and ideas that are in front of us, including the sidewalk corners. I think Deputy Mayor O'Kane had brought forward an example that was pretty impressive as well. And I'm interested in hearing what the fellow colleagues have to say about this, and I'm going to listen in really well. Thank you.
Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you so much for providing these printouts to us and presenting these different ideas for how to how we might be able to move forward with this project, even though the crosswalk didn't work out. I really love the idea of the stairwell, and I'm pleased to see that the maintenance and the longevity of it was much longer than I realized, like 20 to 25 years it said, or
is possible
if
for,
it's
that's what we
maintained well.
generally consider for current contemporary murals, because we do apply the sealant. But in the public art world, murals are temporary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking like much more shorter time frame, so it was like within a year or something, so I didn't realize it could last much longer than that.
We are officially putting a 10-year limit on it, just in case.
Okay. One question I do have, and it might just be on my printout, but I can't see, is there an ask tonight? I can't see what this current shortfall says. It's the color didn't print out on mine.
I'm terribly sorry.
Yeah.
No, we are not asking for funding. We are asking,
the only real participation that they're asking of the city is the prep work, to pressure wash the stairs and then to apply the anti-graffiti sealant over the top. So that's really the only ask, with the exception of getting approval to install it on city property.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Deputy Mayor.
I have less of a question than just a couple of comments that go along with this. First, I want to say we're really fortunate to have Arts of Kenmore here. working with our communities to ensure that we have representational art in our community that shows the diversity that we have here. So thank you for your leadership and those that you work with. It's really important. I love the thought and care that's gone into the stairwell, and want to thank you for that. And I really liked that with the Four Corners, the opportunity to expand and including other communities that we can represent on those corners. I thought that was really thoughtful. I haven't seen that put together in that way before. So art's about creativity, finding ways to express who we are and what this world is about. It's exciting stuff. So thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, similarly, I just want to thank you for your creativity and staff as well in working together to not kind of take the disappointment on the sidewalks as the end of the idea. So really appreciate you taking it to the next step. And I too really like the corner idea and expanding it.
Any other comments? Questions? All right. With that said, then the chair would entertain a motion to authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with the Kenmore Urban Pride Committee and Arts of Kenmore to install Pride themed art on City Hall property.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to authorize the city manager to enter into an agreement with the Kenmore Urban Pride Committee and Arts of Kenmore to install Pride-themed art on City Hall property, seconded by Deputy Mayor O'Kane. Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember Baker.
No.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 6 yeses and 1 no, the motion passes.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember.
I just wanted to thank the Arts of Kenmore for coming before us today and celebrating arts in our community and bringing us together. So thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, proposed changes to the city's business registration program presented by Deputy City Manager Stephanie Lukash, ARPA Management Analyst Jana Quinn, and Administrative Specialist Teresa McAllister.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of the council. We are happy to bring to you tonight a presentation on some proposed changes to the city's business registration program. So I'm going to turn it over to Teresa. She's going to tell you a little bit more about us, and then I think I'm going to talk about, oh, do you want me to just do the next one? Oh, okay, well, okay. So why we're here. So we are here because last year, when I took the role of Assistant City Manager, one of the questions I had to do with the business registration program and how much revenue we generate from it. And I'd heard from some KBA members that they had some questions about our program. So I thought, well, let's put together a presentation and bring it to the Kenmore Business Alliance. And Teresa McAllister did a wonderful job putting together a presentation that she presented to the KBA, the Kenmore Business Alliance, back in October of last year. And it really was, to me, a commitment to providing greater transparency to our businesses about this business registration revenue. And as we had a conversation and Teresa presented the program, she gave some background and history on the program, and then talked about how it works and how much revenue we generate. There were questions that our KBA members asked us about why do we not charge a business registration fee for non-resident businesses? So those are businesses who come into Kenmore to conduct business but are not based here. And it was a really good question. And the way they presented it was, it's not a level playing field. So we're paying the business registration fee. And it's not that it's a big expense because it's $10 to the city, but it was more the principle of it. But they were saying it's not a level playing field. And it was a really good question. And we're the kind of city that responds to these kinds of questions from our business community. And so we looked into it. And what we found out in our research was that Kenmore and Medical Lake are the only two cities in the state of Washington that don't charge a business registration fee to non-resident businesses. So that prompted a larger effort, and that's what we're here tonight to talk about, is that particular piece of it. And then the other part that I think is really important, and I get this question, and I know you get this question as council members, how many businesses do we have in Kenmore? And you know what the honest truth is? We don't know. And that's because we don't require business registration. So the other part of this presentation we're going to talk about is a requirement to have all of our businesses register so we know who they are, so we can reach them. And Janet here, as you know, we have a business assistance program for ARPA open right now. We would love to be able to reach every business based in Kenmore and tell them about that program, but we don't have all of their information. So that's the other part of the program. So there's a lot more that Teresa is going to talk about, but I wanted to share. That's what prompted tonight's conversation, and what we've been working on for the last several months was really, it all started at a KBA meeting back in October when we presented the program, and they had some really good questions for us, and we did some research, and that led us to be here. So Teresa, take it away.
Good evening, council members. So tonight we are actually just proposing some changes to the program and hoping for some discussion and potentially propose some action for motion to come back with maybe an amended ordinance in a future date. So first, this evening I'm going to be covering, we're going over what the current business registration program consists of and what going into the changes that we're going to be proposing. Then we'll talk about fees, thresholds, revenues, and expenditures, and then also talk about the city's partnership with the Kenmore Business Alliance. So if I can ask you to hold your questions until the end of the presentation, that would be much appreciated. So for our discussion, I wanted to provide first some clarification of some terms that you'll be hearing this evening. First of all, we get this question a lot. What does business registration mean? So when a business registers with the city, they're essentially getting their city business license, and it will show up on their state business license as a city endorsement. So I may be using those phrases interchangeably this evening. And the non-resident business, as Stephanie mentioned, are businesses located outside of the city limits that are coming into the city to engage in revenue producing activities. And as you can see in the example, this out-of-state business license apparently does a lot of business within Washington. So you see their city endorsements for their non-resident. So there's many other cities do this, and not Kenmore. Excuse me. And then DOR BLS is the Department of Revenue's Business Licensing Service. The city is a partner of the Department of Revenue's Business Licensing Service to administer the program for us, the business license applications and renewals. All cities in Washington who have a business registration program are required to be a partner with DOR or another organization called File Local. And there's only literally a handful of other cities that are partnered with File Local. I think that's because they were previously handling their B&O taxes for them. So a quick overview of the business registration program as it is. Businesses including, or who is currently required to register, businesses including nonprofits and home-based businesses that have a physical location in Kenmore. So the DOR determines that by the physical address that is entered into their business application. And if it says Kenmore, then you would be required to have a registration. Now that means only for businesses that are above the threshold of $2,000. That's their, estimated gross income. And a benefit also to registering your business is to become eligible to be listed in the findkenmore.org business directory.
Who is exempt from businesses? Well, Kenmore businesses, of course, with gross income, annual income is less than $2,000 or less. Businesses not located in Kenmore, the non-resident businesses. And minors, where there's no other person employed by the minor. Farmers selling their own products, government agencies, churches and religious bodies for their religious activities only, political groups and organizations as to their political activities only, and schools and universities as to their educational endeavors only. For example, Bestier would need to register their business for their income earning activities such as catering and venue rentals. So what does it cost to register? The Kenmore's business registration fee is $10. There is no fee for the nonprofits. The city business license needs to be renewed annually, and that fee is $10. And the renewal fee is prorated for the first year based on renewal dates of existing state license. And how to register, you go to the same place you go to get your state business license, the DOR. The city does not process registration license applications here. And the city, oh, and I already talked about the city having a partnership with the DOR. A little bit about data that we have access to once the business is registered. So as of April 30th, we had 1,156 business registered. But if you add these numbers together, for the HOMOC, general, and nonprofit, it comes to 1,170 something. So that's more of a to-date number. So we have about 1,173 businesses registered as of today. As you can see, there are 3 different types of licenses that businesses would apply for, and that would be your home occupation, nonprofit, and otherwise a general license. This number does not represent, these numbers do not represent, however, businesses who fall under the revenue threshold of $2,000. We don't know what that number is, which is what Stephanie was alluding to earlier. And most cities also require that all businesses register. It gives them a more complete picture of their business community. And determining the top sectors of businesses in Kenmore can also be a useful tool for our outreach and marketing, as well as determining categories for our business directory. This is always kind of an interesting piece of information to see what our top businesses are in the city. So now we'll talk about the proposed changes. As Stephanie mentioned earlier, the city responded to the KBA's inquiry about the possibility of adding a non-business registration to the city's current program. In researching the option, the city staff determined 2 additional areas for improvement to the program. The first one would be to require all businesses to register and adding a no-fee registration for all businesses at or below the threshold. And I'll go into that in more detail in a moment. And the second proposed change would be to raise the gross annual income threshold from $2,000 to $12,000. And the third would be, of course, to add the non-resident business registration requirement. For the first proposed amendment, staff is recommending expanding the requirement to register to include all businesses, whether they're in Kenmore or outside of Kenmore, and regardless of their revenue. This would be an all-inclusive. So the requirement to register would provide the city the ability to be all-inclusive in its outreach efforts, and as well as providing information about business assistance and training opportunities, as well as about the KBA meetings and networking. For example, the current ARPA assistant grant application is open. The challenge has been, as Janet can attest to, reaching the smaller businesses. We just don't know who they are or how to get in touch with them. We've literally been going door to door. I'm going to go back, sorry. So as part of this proposal, we would offer a 0 fee or fee-free registration option. And that would apply to businesses that have an income that's less than the threshold. And as mentioned earlier, many cities in Washington require all cities to register, including Lake Forest Park, Bothell, Kirkland, Shoreline, as well as Mill Creek, Snohomish, SeaTac, Mercer Island, just to name a few. So the second proposal is the recommendation to revert the gross annual revenue threshold from 2,000 back to the pre-pandemic amount of 12,000. So in 2020, the threshold was lowered to $2,000 to allow the city to reach more businesses during COVID pandemic. For example, the city provided pertinent information to businesses about working Washington small business grants and the Stay Safe business supply kit distribution. Business reporting $12,000 or less would still apply for a fee-free registration. The city does not charge a $10 fee, in other words. The $12,000 threshold is also consistent with the state's business registration requirement. In our research, we have found that income thresholds range between, throughout other cities that we've looked at, have ranged between $2,000 to $12,000, with a few exceptions. And the threshold just cannot go below $2,000. And city staff, as well as our DEI consultant, feel that raising the threshold to $12,000 is supportive to the small business community by waiving the city's registration fee for those businesses under the threshold. And the third proposed change is, of course, the non-resident business registration. And as mentioned earlier, Kenmore is only one of two cities that have registration programs that do not require non-resident businesses to come and register. As a matter of fact, pretty much weekly, I field calls from contractors and consultants that are preparing to come in to do work in the city, asking how do I get this city license? Because when they go to the DOR website to apply for their Kenmore city license, it's grayed out. And it's very confusing to them. They call the city and they're like, how do I get my license? We need to get this license. So it's normal practice. It's expected. And it just feels odd actually saying, we don't do that. Anyway, so the structure that we're proposing that would match, the structure of this part of this program would match that of the resident business registration. So all businesses would be required to register. The threshold for paying the registration fee would be $12,000. And the fee would be $10, just like it is for our Kenmore resident businesses. And at or under threshold, they can apply for a fee-free registration. But we would at least have information about all the businesses that would be coming into the city. So this is just a picture of our current registration fee schedule. As you can see, right now, we don't require a fee. We don't even require registration for these businesses. But so in the city fee for registration for both new businesses and existing businesses applying for their initial registration, and home-based businesses is $10, and nonprofit is $0. The Department of Revenue has an application fee. And as you can see, for new businesses, it's $50. And the renewal fees are $10 and $5, excuse me. And these are the proposed changes to both the revenue threshold and the fees. So we're proposing to change the threshold from 2,000 to 12,000. And if the revenue is at 12,000 or less, the city would charge $0. And the city fee otherwise would remain the same. And the DOR, we don't have the ability to address the administrative application fees for the DOR. And as you can see, the last item on the list is the non-resident business. So we would be adding a new fee, a new revenue. Speaking of revenue, excuse me. So speaking of fees, now we'll transition to the discussion about registration revenues. In 2013, when the business registration program was adopted by council, it was important to the city that the revenue from the program be allocated directly to supporting and promoting the local businesses and the Kenmore Business Alliance. The city receives about $8,000 to $9,000 each year in revenue from these registration fees. We will, in a moment, look at the past, present, and future expenditures of the business registration program and a couple, in the next couple slides. With the addition of non-resident registration, we anticipate that the business registration revenue will be close to double. And that's based on information that was provided by the Department of Revenue, as well as speaking with other cities. In consideration of the proposed fee-free registration, there are approximately 160 businesses that are currently registered that fall between the income range of $2,000 and $12,000. So we would potentially have a revenue loss of approximately $1,600. The business expenditures. So in the revenues were spent prior to the pandemic. As you can see on business networking, advertising, we had a subscription for the directory and of course some monthly payments towards supporting the KBA. The majority of the revenue went to the supporting the KBA. We also paid, I don't know, we paid like $75 a month for the subscription. Then things changed. And during 2020, a lot of these expenses went away. There were in-person events were canceled due to the pandemic. So the networking events, which were held twice a year, we no longer were doing. We also advertised in the local paper, notifying businesses of their responsibility to register their business. That's how the city had chose to be business friendly and just to provide some sort of way to let them know gently that they need to register their business with the city. And we did that through advertising and putting it in our new local newsletter. The business directory is now hosted on our city website. We no longer needed that, needed this subscription because we have in 2020, our new website was implemented. So that was really nice. And then the Port of Seattle grant that's an economic development grant, also covers some of the business training, acceleration training that we do. Now I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Teresa. So one of the things that we've looked at this year in our new approach to business registration was the previous partnership with the chamber that we paid about $300 a month for support to the Kenmore Business Alliance, and the new chamber executive director, Dana Abar, and we have been having conversations. And so as of this, pleased to share that as of this spring, the chamber, we're no longer paying the chamber that fee, which is equivalent to, the KBA is a committee of the chamber, and there's a similar committee of the chamber for Bothell, and so it's equitable to what's happening in Bothell. So we're pleased about that and appreciate the strengthened partnership with the chamber, and there's some continued support of attendance at the meetings, but without that significant, as you know, when you add it up over a course of a year, it was a big chunk of the revenue that we generate. The other big thing that we'll talk a little bit more about too is the commitment we've made to involving our KBA members in the decisions about how we spend the revenue. It's not a huge amount, but you can do some significant things with the amount that we do raise. And we've been listening to suggestions from KBA members. And in fact, I'll talk in the next slide about what we did in January to get their input on how to spend the dollars this year. And then we're also committed to doing an annual presentation to the KBA on the business registration program, just like we did in October of last year that led us to be here with you tonight. So in January of this year, we had a strategic planning session with the Kenmore Business Alliance. And I have to say it was a lot of fun. So what we did is, in bringing transparency to this revenue, we asked for ideas on how we might spend the money. And I had lots of conversations over a couple of months generating ideas. And then there were 7 that emerged that had multiple people had suggested. So we had an exercise in the community room next door where we kind of a sticky note exercise, and it was really fun, a lot of laughter, and everybody had 5 sticky notes and they voted on their favorite items. And it was a really fun exercise, a lot of connection and sort of jockeying for votes and all of that. It was really fun. And in the end, the group decided on 2 things. One was revamping the findkenmore.org domain, and also create a new and improved business directory. Because if you go to findkenmore.org right now, it takes you to the business directory, and there's no other content on findkenmore.org. And it's just a missed opportunity, and everyone agrees. So that's the number one thing that the group agreed, and that they go hand in hand, that a new business directory that's more interactive, that businesses can input their information, pictures and logos and things. So that's happening. We're exploring ideas for that. And then supporting networking events at local businesses. As Teresa mentioned, we used to do more of this pre-pandemic, and then we're slowly getting back to doing this, but I'm excited about supporting more businesses, these networking events at our local businesses. So we're patronizing the businesses as we bring people together.
So we're almost closing up here. So I just wanted to, we had put together a proposed timeline for these potential changes to our business registration program. And so we're at the presentation for discussion and direction. And next we would anticipate drafting an ordinance, maybe coming back in July. Also, this would involve a new fee. So we provide some fee notification to development services. We've already been in discussion with development services to find out how this would affect their business functions. And then the Department of Revenue requires any changes to our program 75 days prior to an effective date. And then there's a fee resolution that's adopted by council in Q4. And of course, there's going to be a huge outreach and community engagement piece to inform mostly like the developers. I'm not even sure who else, but we're working on that. And we'll have to continue with that. So anyway, we are looking at an anticipated effective date, January 1, 2024. I also wanted to mention that Janet is up here too. She was very instrumental in helping to put together a lot of this research and double looking at my data and make sure it all makes sense. She's been really key. And then Brian Randall, of course, is part of the team. And he helps me keep track of what we are spending and what's coming in for the business registration program. So that's the team. Any questions for us or comments? And hopefully you have some direction for us.
Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you so much for presenting on this topic. It's been a while, I think, since we've talked about business registration. And I first just want to say I feel like it's really compelling when you've gone to the KBA and asked for their direct feedback on all of the things that you've presented tonight. I do have one question. Like, in principle, I agree with the idea of being able to waive the registration fee for businesses for whom that might be a lot or a burden, but I feel like the 12,000 amount, I wonder if there's reasoning behind that. It sounds like that was pre-pandemic levels, and maybe this was decided on a long time ago, but I guess what I'm thinking is, it feels to me that we should waive it for people for whom it is an issue, but for some people, maybe it's not an issue, and they could make 10,000, they could make 5,000, they could make 12,000, they could make whatever amount. If it's a side business, that might be different versus if it's someone's primary source of income.
So I know Janet has some, I don't know, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you had done a lot of research and thought about that quite a bit. And yes, you're right. 12,000 was the pre-pandemic amount. And we also considered the fact that somebody, although they wouldn't be paying a city registration fee, they would be paying the Department of Revenue's application fees. And so we looked at, well, what revenue level do they need to be at in order to, and where they are required to get a state business license, and that was 12,000. Anything else to add to that, Janet?
Yeah, I'll just add that there's a staff time component. If you parse it out, it's much more streamlined if we just decide on a threshold and go with that for everyone. Pre-pandemic, it was at 12,000, like Teresa said. And the purpose of lowering it was to reach more businesses and to collect, to be able to reach them for programs and things. And if we substitute that by requiring all businesses to register, then we kind of address that, and we give $10 is not an onerous fee. It's not a lot of money, but it is a symbolic gesture in recognition of smaller businesses and home-based businesses especially. And one of the KBA businesses pointed out to me that the difference between the annual gross revenue and the actual profit revenue is different. And so it seemed fair to assign a threshold of 12,000 instead. And we did present it to the DEIA committee, and their recommendation was higher than 12,000 because it's just an accessibility factor, and we want not to have a barrier in place of any kind. And I know that that's where you guys are coming from as well. But that's, I guess, some of the philosophy and the thought behind it.
Thank you, Janet.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for explaining that. And I think it makes sense if the 12,000 is the same as the state. And my only, I think, additional feedback is, I think staff is probably already thinking about this, but because then it becomes sort of like optional whether people register below that threshold, I would just want to make sure that we're really, or it's not, oh, I'm sorry, the registration fee then is not required, but we would still require people to register. Okay.
Yes.
I would just want to really emphasize the value of being a part of that registry.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. I absolutely can support the $12,000 threshold, seeing that we're looking at really what is gainful earnings, right? And when people are working at the level of micro businesses, it's usually to ensure that they can have sustainability in their household when those issues come up. And that's what we hear from our business partners. I like the idea that we're creating a connective pathway from the federal level to our state that will pass on down, so we can then help lift up our community and watch business owners evolve over time. And that's something that matches our values as an inclusive, welcoming city. So I'm all in support of anything that can help create our vibrancy of business, ensure greater equity. I'm fine with a $0 fee. Absolutely love the idea of required registration. And I certainly hope we can have some kind of links up for the businesses so that people can explore and support local business. So thank you.
Councilmember Baker.
So Kenmore businesses are required to register, but do they have to pay?
Currently, yes.
Yes, all Kenmore businesses run out of the garage or wherever have to pay.
If their annual gross income is $2,000
If
or
they're
over
what?
$2,000.
If they're over 2,000 or 12,000?
2,000 currently.
2,000. All businesses out of the city that do business in Kenmore have to pay.
Currently, we don't have that in place.
They don't have to pay.
No.
So nobody doing business in Kenmore that's not located in Kenmore doesn't have to pay.
Correct.
So there's no plans to change that.
That's what we're asking for tonight, is to change that, because Kenmore is only one of 2 other cities in Washington that have registration programs that do not require non-resident businesses to register with the city.
Okay.
That's what's being proposed in the non-resident business registration aspect of this
So you're
presentation.
asking for it, but you're not requiring it.
We're asking it to be added to the business registration
I
requirement.
can't, I'm sorry, I can't.
Oh, that we're asking for it to be added to the business registration requirement. So you know, when earlier when I said, when a business applies for a business registration or city endorsement, they apply for a home-based, a nonprofit, or a general, we're asking to add a non-resident
Okay.
business registration.
Just out of curiosity, who would enforce that?
I'll let you answer that.
So this is done through the Department of Revenue
Then
site.
who will
So-
ensure we get that money?
Well, we're not going to be spending, we don't have a team of people. The people that work on this, you see at this table, and we all have many other things we also do.
Right.
So this won't be a priority to enforce, but what we want to do is we want businesses to register because we want to know who you are out there so we can let you know about opportunities and grant programs and invite you to join us at the KBA table and come to other events and let them know about other sponsorship opportunities and other ways they can get their word out about their businesses and their products and their services they're selling. So that's why we think it's really important to require registration, because we want to know who all of our businesses are. And right now we don't. And we've meet every once in a while, somebody comes to the KBA who found out about it word of mouth, and they say, I wish I had known about the KBA. And I think it's because you're a small home-based business and you're not registered. And so you're not on our list. And so we don't have your information. So that's what we're trying to remedy in part here. And then the leveling the playing field is the other piece of it that you were talking about with the non-resident businesses.
So then in order to get on the list, it's $50 first time to DOR.
Councilmember Baker, can I ask that you scoot forward for the microphone?
So then it's $50 to DOR and then $10 to us.
Yes.
Yes, for new businesses or
new-
reopened businesses. Mhm.
And the beauty of partnering with the Department of Revenue is the seamlessness of that. When they go to that website to register for their business license, their state business license, then it automatically triggers that Kenmore endorsement. So.
Deputy Mayor.
First, I have a question and then I have a comment. Did I understand correctly that with these changes and the raising of the threshold from 2,000 to 12,000, that the total revenue will be less or about the same as what we've got? So there's not going to be a change in the fees to businesses received by the city of Kenmore, but more Kenmore businesses that are under $12,000 will not be paying that fee. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct. There will be approximately, based on the number of businesses that are currently registered, whose income is between 2 and 12,000, there are about 160 businesses. So there will be a small loss of revenue there. But if we're adding in the non-resident business registration, that will be increased. Also, our spending is down. So we have, it's just, it kind of evens out, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I thought you did a really good job on this presentation,
Thank
and that
you.
was the question that I was asking, because, and you definitely demonstrated the teamwork and research that you did and inclusion of our community, which is incredibly important as we're looking at our local businesses that serve our community and those that are maybe based outside of Kenmore but have a location in Kenmore. They're included in that. I like that we're going to have more access to providing the positive supports that the city of Kenmore can provide to our businesses, which we certainly want to have a process that gives access to businesses to start here and locate here and expand. I think it's incredibly important. I think this work you've done today was presented for us today was very good. It was fun having a new team up here. I wanted to just give you a round of applause from me, saying I thought you did a great job. And thank you. So I very much support the direction we're moving, if you couldn't tell.
Thank you.
But if you needed to hear how I felt, it certainly looks like we're moving in a good direction. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Don't think we're seeing anything else. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Do we want direction?
That says for discussion and direction only. I mean, I think everybody was generally, I didn't hear any major, yeah, sorry. Next up, Personnel Policies Manual Amendments presented by City Manager Rob Carr-Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Honor and City Council. So the Personnel Policies Manual is a really important internal document. And I guess 2 weeks ago, we discussed it. We've been working on a comprehensive update of the manual for the last year. And 2 weeks ago at the City Council meeting, Kathy Weber, our personnel law attorney, and I presented the changes to those to the manual. And we got direction on all the proposed changes except for one. You wanted us to bring back 5.6.4. In particular, you were wanting some more information supporting it, including data on expenses and also refining the language. So as a result of that, I am proposing changes to that section 5.6.4, the business meeting allowance. It further narrows the policy and it makes it more direct in its meaning. And it also adds clarifying language such as travel distances covered by the allowance. And as I mentioned, you had requested additional information on business meeting costs. And that information is included in the agenda bill and fiscal consideration. And also in the agenda bill, you'll see the difference between what was proposed on May 8th and what is now being proposed. So the direction I need tonight is 5.6.4 in the proposed language. And if you come to a consensus on that, then you can entertain a motion to approve resolution 23-398, adopting the personnel policies manual as exhibit A to the resolution.
Discussion, questions?
Not in sync.
Councilor Marshall?
Yeah, and I think I'm still in favor of having receipts produced, and it's my understanding that this proposal would not require the receipts to be produced, right? Correct?
That's correct. Having to track and keep receipts defeats the purpose of the proposal.
Councilor Shrubnik?
From how I'm reading this, unless I mean, maybe you can just confirm how I'm reading this under fiscal considerations. It looks like the average expenditures are about $325 a month. In addition, there's administrative costs of about 80, so roughly $400 a month. And just sort of the annoyance of doing that. So you're proposing that the allowance is $400 a month. Is that correct?
The
Is that-
language says up to 400.
Up to, so yeah, so it's either going to be a wash or a savings. So how I'm reading this, I'm comfortable with it. It's particularly given that several other cities do something quite similar. I'm of course used to working for government and turning in receipts, which I can say is definitely annoying on all sides. So this is a nice way to streamline that, and it doesn't cost anything and it's fully legal, is my understanding from how we discussed it with our city attorney last week.
Any other comments or questions? Councilmember Kugler?
I'll just say, I appreciate the additional revisions to the language, particularly pointing out the travel related costs and whether someone who is receiving this allowance can get additional reimbursement. So thank you for clarifying that they cannot for mileage and meal expenses. And I feel comfortable with this based off of this current version.
Any other comments or questions? Councilmember File.
Thank you. I appreciate the update. I believe this helps create a little bit more transparency and gets us closer to where we need to be. And so I'm comfortable moving forward. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? All right, well, seeing none. Chair would entertain a motion to approve resolution 23-398, adopting the personnel policies manual as exhibit A to the resolution.
So moved.
Second, Councilmember File.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Marshall.
Yeah, I think it's still important to have receipts so that we have the greatest transparency for our citizens. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to approve resolution 23-398, adopting the personnel policies manual as exhibit A to the resolution, seconded by Councilmember File. Deputy Mayor O'Kane.
Yes.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
No.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Councilmember Baker.
Yes.
Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
With 6 yeses and 1 no, the motion passes.
All right. Next, we would have our state legislative session recap, except my understanding is that Ms. Helder is not available until 9 o'clock. Is that correct? Yes, I'm correct, or?
Oh, sorry. No, she is here.
Okay, you were looking, I couldn't figure out if you were agreeing with me or. All right, well, if she is here, then let's jump directly into state legislative session recap.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Good to be with you this evening. If I can just get a confirmation that you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. So I am Shelley Helder. I have the privilege of representing the city of Kenmore as your state government affairs consultant in Olympia. And this evening, I'm going to be providing an update on the outcome of the state legislative session, 2023 session. Before I get started, I do want to note that there is a comprehensive written report included in your council packet. It is a rather lengthy document, so it goes into much more detail than I'll be able to go into this evening. If you have further questions, of course, this evening is a good opportunity, but in the future, that's intended to be a reference document for you all. This evening, I'm going to provide an overview of what happened this session, very high level. I'll review the outcome of the city's 2023 priorities. I'll describe the highlights of additional legislative issues that impact city governance, and then we'll wrap up talking about next steps. The 2023 legislative session was the first time the legislature has conducted their work in person in over 2 years. The public was still able to participate virtually through remote testimony at public hearings, but all legislators were in Olympia. It was the first year of the biennium, and it was a long session, 105 consecutive days. And the primary objective of a long session is to adopt new biennial budgets, which the legislature did. And in addition to adopting the budgets, they considered over 2,100 bills and ultimately passed 485. Because this was the first year of the biennium, any bill that did not pass this year is automatically reintroduced next year. Democrats held strong majorities in both chambers and set the agenda in terms of what policies were prioritized. And then following the last legislative or the last election cycle, there were over 20 new legislators that were elected. And so that resulted in new committee assignments, new committee chairs, and new members in positions of leadership for the four caucuses. And all of that impacts what happens during a legislative session. So as I mentioned, the primary objective of the long session is to adopt budgets. The state has 3 budgets. The operating budget funds all state agency operations, the largest of which is the K-12 education system. The 2023-25 state operating budget is a $69.8 billion budget. Some noteworthy allocations are $20 million for grants to local governments for updating and implementing comprehensive plans and development regulations, and $150 million to transition individuals living in encampments to housing. There were over $250 million in various behavioral health services that were funded through the operating budget. The capital budget funds public and nonprofit construction projects that are non-transportation related. It's a $9 billion budget primarily funded through the sale of bonds. There's $95 million in remaining bond capacity for a supplemental budget next year. And this capital budget makes major investments in housing and homelessness services, behavioral health, and education. The third and final budget is the transportation budget. It's $13.5 billion, and it's the first biennium for implementation of the Move Ahead Washington package. The revenues that fund the transportation budget, primarily the gas tax revenue, is continuing to decline. And so heading into session, many communities were concerned because the governor's budget delayed funding for key projects. For the most part, the legislature was able to honor previous commitments it had made and provided phasing of funds over the next 6 years so that there's predictability for planning purposes. This was also the first budget to incorporate Climate Commitment Act revenues, which are scattered through all 3 budgets. And that's money that must be spent on carbon reducing programs and projects. So moving on to discuss the outcome of the city's top priorities, the city identified 6 priorities for the 2023 session. The first was urging the legislature to require all communities to incorporate climate planning in their comprehensive plan. And I'm pleased to share that this policy made it over the finish line this year. After several years of policy refinement, House Bill 1181 was signed into law and takes effect on July 23rd. The bill adds the goal of climate change and resiliency to the list of elements that are required in comprehensive plan. And the budget, the state operating budget, provides funding for implementation of the new law, both for state agencies and for local governments. Our second priority was a capital budget request of $5 million for the Plymouth Affordable Housing Development. Senator Stanford and Representative Kloba sponsored the budget request, and we met with capital budget leaders in all 4 caucuses. Everyone we met with was supportive of the project, and although the budget request was higher than a typical appropriation, they expressed their commitment to try to address the funding gap. I think nearly everyone we met with was really inspired by the project. To our surprise, the House and the Senate proposals both included the full $5 million that we requested. And typically when a project is funded at the same level in both budgets, that's a good indication that it will be funded in the final budget. But given the size, we didn't rest on that expectation. We continue to be in contact with legislators and staff who gave strong indications that it would be included in the final budget. And our first district legislators received the same feedback when they met with their budget leads as well. When the final budget was released, there was only $1 million specifically listed for the project. And it wasn't only disappointing, it was really confusing. Confusing to me and to the city legislators. They expected the full amount to be included. We eventually were able to track down that rather than allocating the total amount via the discretionary awards through the Housing Trust Fund, the budget writers opted to provide more money to the competitive housing trust fund projects. So although it's allocated indirectly, the end result is still a total of $5 million for the project. The third priority was support for the stand-up of the Crisis Receiving Center in North King County. This was a priority that was shared by the cities of Kirkland, Bothell, Shoreline, and Lake Forest Park. And this project has been years in the making. We weren't sure if there would be sufficient grant funding available for the project. But leading up to and throughout the legislative session, I participated in routine coordinating meetings with the government affairs team for Connections Health Solutions and the contract lobbyists for the other cities to ensure that the entire partnership was speaking with one voice. Ultimately, the facility was fully funded through grant programs, and we didn't need to pursue a direct appropriation through the legislature. But we did support the passage of Senate Bill 5120, which creates a licensing pathway for the 23-hour crisis relief center. The credit for the success of this priority is owed to city staff here in Kenmore and other partner cities who have really shepherded this project from vision to pending reality. The fourth priority was lifting the 1% property tax cap. There were 3 different bills introduced this session that would have lifted the cap to 3%, but none of them advanced. One was voted out of committee, and there was a surge of excitement about another bill in the final weeks of session, but ultimately this remains a very challenging policy to advance. The 5th priority was a request for new funding options for local jurisdictions to address the need for affordable housing, with a specific emphasis that the options be progressively structured to minimize the impact on low and moderate income households. We supported House Bill 1628, which would have authorized an additional 0.25% real estate excise tax for local governments. The bill had 2 public hearings. Deputy Mayor O'Kane testified at one and Councilmember Baker testified at the other. And on both occasions, the city expressed strong support for the bill and offered a recommendation that the local REIT be structured to allow local governments the option to impose that third quarter REIT only on properties above a certain sale price. Again, the goal was to create a progressive structure that would be easy for the Department of Revenue to implement, since we'd received feedback from them that prior proposals were if not difficult, then impossible to implement. So this structure got the Department of Revenue buy-off, but ultimately the bill did not pass the legislature. The final priority was a request for legislation allowing clean air agencies to declare an air pollution emergency during extended periods of unhealthy air created by wildfire smoke, and to regulate and reduce operations of major industries that emit air contaminants. Senator Stanford introduced Senate Bill 5355, which would have done just that. This concept is an expansion of Clean Air Agency's authority and has pretty significant implications for major industries. The bill did not receive a public hearing this year, but it did start a conversation that will need to be continued over the interim months for this to be a viable policy in the future. So in addition to the city's top priorities, there were dozens of other policies advanced that impact city government. So I'm going to briefly review highlights from 3 categories. In the first category of public safety, there were 2 primary policies discussed. The first was vehicular pursuits. In 2021, the legislature passed a law requiring probable cause rather than reasonable suspicion to believe that the person in the vehicle has committed certain offenses before an officer could engage in a vehicular pursuit. This higher threshold has caused concern among many law enforcement agencies as they've experienced more people eluding or trying to get away from police. Advocates of the reform were concerned that reverting back to the reasonable suspicion threshold would require or would result in more dangerous pursuits. After some unique legislative maneuvers, Senate Bill 5352 passed the legislature. It lowers the evidentiary threshold for vehicular pursuits to reasonable suspicion for specific crimes. Notably, those crimes do not include property crimes. That was a major sticking point for some legislators who wanted to see the bill go farther. For others, the bill was a reversal of the progress that was made on police reform in the 2021 session. But the bill passed because it had enough votes, and there were enough legislators who saw it as an important step, but perhaps not the final solution on this topic. The second topic is the reason the legislature was called back to Olympia for a special session. The state's current law on possession of controlled substances is set to expire on June 30th. That law was intentionally established as a temporary solution following the Supreme Court's ruling in early 2021 that drug possession was not a felony. Senate Bill 5536, known as the Blake Fix Bill, initially passed the Senate with a bipartisan mix of votes and established possession of controlled substances as a gross misdemeanor. And then it outlined the procedure for pretrial diversion and a pathway for vacation of conviction. When it got to the House, it was amended substantially. It established drug possession as a misdemeanor rather than a gross misdemeanor, and included use in public places, among many other changes. But because the bill passed the two chambers in different versions, it didn't pass the legislature. So a committee was formed at the end of session to create a compromise bill. That compromise was brought forward on the final day of session, was brought to the House for a vote, and it failed. There were insufficient votes for it to pass the House. And so the regular session adjourned with no Blake Fix. The governor called for a special session to begin on May 16th. And so last Tuesday, legislators returned to Olympia and debated a new compromise bill that had been negotiated between all four caucuses. And the compromise establishes knowing possession as a gross misdemeanor, as well as public use as a gross misdemeanor. Both are subject to a maximum of 180 days in jail and a $1,000 fine for the first two offenses. If there is a third offense, the maximum number of days in jail is raised to 364, which is the typical limit for gross misdemeanors. This was part of the compromise that allowed the bill to have enough votes to pass. There were really strong and impassioned floor speeches making arguments for and against the merits of this legislation. But as I mentioned, it did pass and was signed into law by the governor on the same day. The second category I want to mention is housing, and this was a top priority for the legislature. There were hundreds of bills introduced on this topic. A few noteworthy bills that passed include condominium liability reform, providing a SEPA exemption for residential development that is consistent with comprehensive plans, providing cities with resources to improve permit processing, and perhaps the most discussed and longest coming policy was on middle housing. The momentum for the middle housing bill had been building for years, and the legislature was really motivated to reduce construction costs. Since one of the major cost drivers of new homes is the price of land, the concept behind building more units on the same footprint was really appealing to lawmakers. There were easily 10 dozen different versions of this bill over the last few years, so it can be kind of difficult to keep track of what was included in the version that passed. And I'm going to start off by saying what the bill doesn't do. It does not allow for skyrise development in single family neighborhoods. And it does not prohibit the construction of single family homes. It does establish a minimum number of units that must be authorized on all lots zoned primarily for residential. For cities below 25,000 in population, the city must allow at least 2 units on all lots. For cities with greater than 25,000, they must allow 2 units on all lots and 4 units on lots within a quarter-mile walking distance of a major transit stop. In the bill, an accessory dwelling unit is considered 1 unit, which means that if a city already allows ADUs on all lots, then they already comply with that component of the bill. The version that passed the legislature was a compromise, both on the part of housing advocates who wanted to see greater density authorized on all lots, and on the part of many local governments who did not want their land use decisions to be preempted. The final category I want to mention is grant funding for sidewalks. More and more, the state is moving toward allocating funding for local projects through grant programs. Because city staff were diligent in submitting competitive applications, the city was well ranked for 5 projects on both the Safe Routes to School and the Pedestrian Bicycle Safety Grant programs that are funded through the state's transportation budget. 3 of the 5 projects were above the anticipated funding level, and 2 were within the realm of possibility if those grant programs had received a higher level of funding. So we advocated for that higher level of funding, and our legislators did as well. When the budgets were released, the programs were allocated the higher level of funding needed for the city's 2 additional projects. What was not evident in the public budget documents, the budget documents that were available to the public, is that the higher level of funding turned out to be a combination of a reappropriation and new funding for these programs. So although the budget didn't fund all 5 of the city's projects, 3 projects totaling $4.9 million will be awarded to the city. So now that the legislative session is over, what comes next? Well, I think I have told you all before that lobbying is a year-round job. So to be successful during the legislative session, it's important to keep up the work during the interim months. I think the first thing that I would encourage the city to do is to consider ways of thanking your legislators, not only for advocating for the city's priorities, which they very much did, but also for their dedication of time and energy to public service. You all know that it can be a thankless job, so receiving encouragement and appreciation from fellow electeds goes a long way. The second thing is that there were a lot of bills that the legislature passed and a lot of funding that was allocated to the city, more grant funding made available for future grant rounds. So there is a lot of work to do. And I know city staff who already have their plates full will have even more to do in the coming months and years to ensure that the money that the city was allocated is used in the time frame that it was appropriated. And then lastly, I know it sounds a little crazy since we just finished, but it's never too soon to begin thinking about what our priorities should be for the 2024 session. In the fall, we will update the city's legislative documents to reflect the items that we accomplished this year, and then we'll add new items, recognizing it's not going to be a budget year and it's going to be a short session. So we'll keep those items in mind as we consider the priorities for the supplemental year. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Shelley. I know it wasn't part of this session then, but could you remind us, if you know offhand, where is the 61st Avenue sidewalk funding, or where that is in the hopper?
Yeah, good question. So just for context, the city was awarded $3.5 million for the 61st Avenue sidewalk replacement through the Move Ahead Washington packet to the legislature passed last year. The Move Ahead package is a 16-year package, and this year the legislature essentially phased the funding for projects over the next 6 years. So some projects received confirmation that they will get their funding at some point in the next 6 years. Unfortunately, 61st Avenue is not one of them. We are in the future bucket, so that is more than 6 years out. It doesn't mean that that can't be changed. I imagine that there will be lots of movement through funding and projects on those lists if additional revenue is made available.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Do you mind if Your Honor, do you
Yeah,
mind if I
of
add to
course.
that? Thanks. In the meantime, we've already secured 1.5 million of Ped Bike money for that project, and we'll be putting that money to work. Definitely, obviously, it won't complete the full project, but we'll be able to get going on a portion.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Thank you. This was a great overview and of course, a very thorough report, which I really appreciate. I have a few questions. I don't want to dominate the whole thing. One is on missing middle, just to underscore a point and clarify. So we are currently under 25,000, although not by much in terms of population. So our requirement as a city would be to allow up to 2 units on all residential properties, which, if I'm hearing you correctly, we already do with our ADU ordinance, so that could suffice. Is that correct? Okay, so I wanted to clarify that. And then, you know, it won't be long before we're over 25,000 population, so we should be poised for that next level, which is within 4 units, up to 4 units, or allowing at least 4 units within a quarter mile of transit. What my question is as I read it, I think it's fairly high capacity transit lines. And what we were considering on the planning commission was actually broader. So would it be just for our city, the equivalent of 522, or would it be any bus line?
It's a great question. It is a quarter mile walking distance of a major transit stop, which defines
Okay.
would essentially for Kenmore would be the 522 BRT.
Okay. Yeah, okay, very good. And then my other smaller questions on the behavioral health, there's 44 million for Recovery Navigator and 44, for interesting same amount, for mobile crisis teams. In looking over your report, I didn't necessarily see the bills that were associated. I'm just curious about much more level of detail on that, and maybe you can point me at some point to the bills that are associated with that. That would be awesome. And on the homeless services, is it just for, I mean, you have the 130 for the Housing Essential, the HEN program, 150 for encampment. Is the encampment piece just the right-of-way work, kind of expanding that fund? It's right-of-way, so it's state right-of-way. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Deputy Mayor?
Would it be okay for a comment?
Sure.
Okay. First, Shelley, thank you for your representation of the city of Kenmore. I am amazed by the breadth of work that you do in Olympia for this city, and I want to thank you for that and your always thoughtful, thorough presentations of the outcomes of session, preparation for a session, and the outcomes. I'm thankful for them, and I just wanted to give you that, share that with you. I did want to call attention to something for council that I thought was interesting, and I just want to share how important it is for us to raise issues, and sometimes in unconventional form. I was really thankful that you, Shelley, that you were sharing about the Air Pollution Emergencies Senate Bill 5535 that was sponsored by Derek Stanford. I can't help but think that the root of it came from, on July 28th, of 2021 when we were getting prepared for this smoke season that was about to come. I actually brought forward the idea, and council universally supported writing a letter to Governor Inslee. Although a substantial action didn't take place at that time, a seed was planted that our state senator took and ran with, because this is so important. The air we breathe is so important. Air pollution emergencies happen throughout our state. And there is an industry that, how do I say this? It's going to be a challenge to make this happen, but we have a brave senator that brought this to the floor and got the ball rolling. And I am thankful for that. And I'm thankful for our council for whatever, if I'd like to think we had a role in it, but I think that no matter what, the air we breathe is so important. And that this got as far as it did is pretty exciting. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, well, Shelley, I want to thank you for all of your work. The one day I was down there, lobbying, making that go as smoothly as possible. It was great to be back down on campus and talk with folks. And it was great to actually see some of those meetings actually turn into results for the city, especially in regards to the Plymouth project. Really excited that we have that fully funded, and appreciate your help with that.
My pleasure. Thank you for the time this evening.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes.
Shelley mentioned thanking our legislators, and we've been talking about having them come to a meeting and, you know, having a good exchange with them about how the session went, and thanking them in public, and then maybe breaking afterwards for some cake or something. So we're looking to do that in the near future, probably in the next month or two.
Sounds good. Councilor Shubnik.
Maybe as part of that invitation, we could have a signed letter from us thanking them. I would, you know. Thanks.
Sounds good. We could pass a proclamation for a first legislative district delegation day in the city of Kenmore, and request all of our citizens show their appreciation to our hardworking delegation. Sorry, just, okay, sorry.
Well, it is the inaugural first district delegation session for us, so maybe we could do something along those lines.
All right. Thank you very much. Staff report.
Nothing, Your Honor.
All right, council member reports and comments. Council member Baker.
I have nothing this week. Thank you.
Councilor Marshall.
There was a great performance by the Inglemoor Jazz Band that was going to be in the Kenmore Community Club, but somehow that didn't happen. So they had to relocate back up to the cafeteria. That was an awesome and fun event that happened in Kenmore this weekend. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it, but I heard about it. It was great. And then secondly, I want to encourage everybody to read an editorial that was in the Seattle Times yesterday about the city of Seattle's tree ordinance, all the dynamics, the challenges going into that. I think it's a great stance. Really, I think to err on the side of more tree canopy preservation, just something we can think about. And then I love Deputy Mayor O'Kane's observation that great ideas come through unconventional means sometimes. That's spot on. And it's very, very important, I think, for all of us to think about, myself included. And we may not even agree at all with something to begin with, but it behooves us to think, okay, is there something to it? And dare we even compromise if we see something that can benefit all of our citizens? Thank you all.
Councilor Kugler.
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Councilmember Shubnik.
A couple of things. Last week we had a MPRSA meeting. That's North Shore Parks and Recreation Service Area, which is the entity that supports the maintenance of the senior center, the North Shore Senior Center. They are starting to do planning for what happens at the end of the bond. I think it's a bond, or is it a levy, which is in 2025. to determine kind of whether there is a continuing one, what that would entail. So that's kind of where that group is going right now. And I did just want to mention, because I'm kind of excited about it, the first mention of that Kenmore Quad, which is going to be, I think it's going to happen on August 26th in the morning. It's sort of like a miniature triathlon, but with 4 events: swim, bike, run, and paddle. So stay tuned for more information.
Councilmember File.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have some happy little tidbits from the hazardous waste committee meeting we had. There's a little update about batteries. So when you're preparing to dispose batteries, what they really want people to start to do now is put a little piece of tape over each end before you discard it into a bag or a glass jar before you recycle it. And the reason why is so that contact doesn't happen. It reduces fires and reduces chemical leaching that happens to escape and is a problem with our environment. So something simple we can do is to put a little piece of tape on the end of the battery before we throw it away. And today was a great day to celebrate LGBTQ rights, our welcoming and affirming community, our positions and supporting our entire community, let alone business. But I'm also reminded that today is Harvey Lee Milk Day. He was an amazing man who led the Stonewall Caucus, the Stonewall riot situation that brought us to marriage equality and human rights that we have today nationally. And one of the things he's most well known for saying is, "Hope will never be silent." And it resonates in so many aspects of our lives, not just in LGBTQ rights, but environment, housing, how we think about our community and each other. And I just want to think about that. Human-centered kindness goes so far each and every day. And that's all I have to share for today. So thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for giving me the opportunity to read the LGBTQ resolution. As a bisexual member of the LGBTQ community with a transgender son, it's very meaningful to me. It's very meaningful to our community. So thank you.
First, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a little something. I also, again, want to thank, I like this sharing of the proclamations. Gun violence awareness and the message to end gun violence is one that I think most of us on our council are pretty passionate about. But I just want to give a reminder. There are 2 things I want to share. One is why the color orange was selected to represent Gun Violence Awareness Month and Gun Violence Awareness Day. And the reason is because on January 21st, 2013, Hadia Pendleton marched in President Obama's 2nd inaugural parade. 1 week later, Hadia was shot and killed on a playground in Chicago. Soon after this tragedy, Hadia's friends commemorated her life by wearing orange because it's the color hunters wear to protect themselves when they're in the woods. Thousands of people now wear the color orange to honor Hadia and the more than 40,000 people who are killed with guns and approximately 85,000 who are shot and wounded each year. I just want to draw another reminder that 1 year ago tomorrow, Uvalde massacre took place in Texas. And just last November, we did have a gun violence take place in a local high school at Ingram High School that touched us all very directly. I want to thank Councilmember File for bringing up Hope Will Never Be Silent. It's incredibly important that we raise our voices and point towards the world that we want to live in. Like what Karina brought up with LGBTQIA rights, a world where all people are treated fairly, or have access to thriving, healthy lives. And a world, I like that you brought in the environment too, where we are stewards of our environment so that our future is thriving. And another, where I started, I'm going to circle back to gun violence. A world where we don't have to ask for gun violence to end. A world where we don't have to talk about it anymore, where there's more peace, care and consideration for each other, a safer, healthier world where we all have the opportunity to thrive. I thank you for the moment to give a little statement, and I wish you all a beautiful evening. Thank you, and thank you for the early meeting.
I was really hoping people would talk quicker and we'd be done before 9 o'clock. That always feels nice. I just want to, for the public's sake, and I sent an email to all of you earlier today, but I am always trying to find ways to make our meetings a little bit better and find ways to include more folks. And in watching some other city council meetings, I had seen cities where they had individual council members reading proclamations on behalf of the city instead of the mayor reading all of them. And I thought it was a good idea. And not just because reading 3 proclamations in a row really kills your voice before the rest of the meeting starts, but also because I think people have a lot of things that they care about. We all have individual issues that are really close to our hearts. And I wanted to give the opportunity to everybody to play part in that. So going forward, if a proclamation jumps out at you as something that you have a particular interest in, please let me know. I'm happy to hand those around to folks and make this more of a group effort on the proclamation front, on the reading. So just let me know if something pops out. And with that, Kenmore City Council is adjourned.